Hi you guys, this is Tonya Gibbs and I'm going to share with you a mixed media layout process video featuring products from Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft, 7 Gypsies, and the Crafters Workshop. These are the pit pens and the gelatos that I am going to use today. As I use the pit pens, I will give you the product number off of the pen as well as the color. So let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, a girl can never have too many colors in her collection. I'm going to start out with the circle stencil from the Crafters Workshop, and I'm going to work in some full body gesso around in a diagonal. I thought that this stencil reminded me of the big lights that are on the football field, and I wanted to have somewhat of a bokeh effect on my layout. So I'm going to use some Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft glaze along with the dark blue gelato. I'm just going to take a craft knife and pick some of that off. My palette that I'm using is recycled packaging. I like to use those items if I can before I dispense of them. Just use a little bit of the glaze, work in those gelatos really well, and make sure that you don't have any of those little pieces left over because they are highly concentrated. Now I'm going to add some of the Pearl X Interference Red, and that's going to give my little mixture here a really nice pearlized look. I'm going to take a baby wipe and really work those into the fibers of the paper, and it helps to lift some of the color off of the top of the gesso. And again, it's just really helping to blend those gelatos out across my layout. Just use that palette knife, work some more in. You can kind of see here where the glaze has a really nice pearlized look, and also the glaze itself will have a really nice sheen to it as well. Now I'm just going to splatter some areas with the palette knife, and just try and get the color all over the layout. Now I'm just going to use some water on some of those splattered areas just to get them to run a little bit, and I'm hitting them with the heat gun just to ensure that I get everything good and dry, but I also want to be really close with this heat gun so that I can cause this glaze to blister up. That's going to give a little bit of texture. I think I probably end up covering it up in the end, but I really love the effect of this, so I'm going to have to remember to do this the next time I use these products. Isn't that gorgeous? And look at the sheen that you see on that. So now I have a die cut. And a tip I have for you guys is that before I use the paper to die cut it, I usually gesso the full sheet. That way whenever I die cut, I can go ahead and add gelatos, pit pens, whatever product I need to add. And I don't have to worry about gessoing a delicate cut or anything. I'm taking the silver gelato and just really working that in. It has a really nice metallic look to it. And now I'm going to take the numbers stencil from the Crafters Workshop and the white delusional spray and get some more texture into that background. And just really work it in. I wanted to tone down that blue. It was just a little bit too bright. And the numbers kind of remind me of school days, math and everything. This is the Ultimate Grunge stamp, and I'm going to use the dark gray pit pen, and the color on that was, this is called Cold Gray 4233. And I'm just going to use the grid from that stamp set. The pit pens are actually India ink, so they can be used as stamps. You just color over the stamp. You do want to make sure you wipe off your stamps when you're finished. I just have a baby wipe off to the side. I'm also going to use the Scarlet. This is called Deep Scarlet Red 219. And the nice thing about these pit pens is that while they are wet and they're on a prep surface, they're totally blendable. But you can also use them as permanent ink, which is what I've done with the stamping. So once they're dry, they're completely permanent. Now I've taken some more of that deep red, added it to my palette, put a little bit of Pearl X and some water on it. It had kind of looked like it was a little too pink, so I added a little more red to it as well. Now I'm going to splatter this red all over the layout. I'm just using the bottom of the bottle to just get me some nice circles and some more texture. And again, just splattering this red all around. I think all of these effects are great for masculine layouts. It's a great opportunity to add, you know, when you add a bunch of texture, it really comes together for masculine layouts. Now this is the vintage Varsity from 7 Gypsies in the 8x8, and I'm going to use these papers. I just pulled out a couple of sheets from the collection, and I've done some fussy cutting, and I'm just going to, you know, work them in around my layout or around my photograph. This is a photograph of me and my son. After the game, I am the sports photographer for our local newspaper, so I'm on the sidelines, and someone snapped this photo of us after the game, which I really love. So I'm just going to grab out some more of those sheets of the paper and just showing them to you here. I went off camera to fussy cut all the elements out. This is a locker that was at the back of one of the papers, and I found these two pieces in my scrap pile, so I've decided to go ahead and use them on this layout. The brown is actually mounted on a piece of chipboard, and it has a decal edge to it, so I used the dark sepia 175 pit artist pen on the edge to just sort of clean up that edge a little bit and give it a little depth. And then I added some ATG tape, and then I ended up adding score tape to the back of that as well, just to kind of make sure it really sticks on top of the glazes and everything. I found this corrugated piece of scrap that is from 7 Gypsies, and I used the white artist pit pen to just put a little color on that and just kind of rough it up a little bit and give it some life and texture as well. So I've also decided to take the black pit pen and add the edge to all of the extra pieces that I fussy cut out as well. That's the reason I chose black, was because the paper already has kind of a black grungy edge to it, and this just kind of helps to hide that white core of the paper where I cut it out. And I love these two pieces right here, because the black one, it's hard to tell in video, but it says playbook on it. And then the other piece of scrap that I cut out was referee hand signals, a chart for those. So I thought those two went really well together. And it is sort of one of those things you would find in my son's locker, trust me. So now this is just a piece from the paper as well, and it has a little football player with a helmet on. So I'm tucking it in over on that left-hand side. And then the other scrap has a number, and then it's hard to see it in the picture, but there is a football player, I think, on this piece as well, or football field or something. And then it had the 1 on it as well. So at this point, I'm just trying to take all of my layers and figure out where I want to put them, and just, you know, getting the arrangement put together with the collaging of all of these papers. Then I grabbed out this round stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and I'm using the black pit pen, and I'm just coloring in where the stencil is, and using also the negative side of that as well. And that just adds another little bit of grunge to that brown piece. It just was a little too clean. And then this is a ticket from the ephemera that I cut out as well, and it says lunch ticket on it. I put it there in that spot, but I end up moving it, I think, in the end. And then that's the notebook paper that you saw me punch earlier, that I laced up there at the top. And I'm just going to use some. So now I'm just going to play with some placement, and then I decided that I didn't have enough grunge. I'd cover most of it up. So I just took the deep scarlet pen again, and that same stamp with the dates all over it, and just stamped it around. Now that I have my photomat clusters all built out, I kind of felt like I needed to add a little more to that. So I'm going back to my cutout elements and just trying to find placement for all of them. There's a lot of things going on here, but everything has a nice neutral gray color. So I want to be strategic with where I put my pops of color. So I end up moving that ticket over to the right. I really wanted my photograph to have just a little bit more texture to it, so the edges were just a little too clean. I took the Prima tool and distressed it, added some score tape to it. The photograph really didn't need to be elevated any further because of the corrugated board on the back, so I kept it kind of flat. And then once again, taking the black pit pen and just covering up those edges of those pens, and it just kind of it helps to give a sort of outline to all of these elements as well. Well, I noticed that I had actually gotten a little bit of ink on the edge of the banner, so I needed to cover it up. And I was struggling with how to do that, and decided that maybe the star could go over the top of that, but then I didn't like the way the star looked over there. The star needed a little more color, so I went back to my glazes, and they were dried out, so I went back for my gelatos and pulled out the dark blue. Now remember, I had already painted this with silver, so when I add the blue to it, it picks up the silver as well, so it kind of gets a really nice metallic look to it as well. And I'm just adding it in to just kind of pick up some shadows in the star, give it a little depth. Then on the number 4, that is a piece of grunge board from Tim Holtz, and it was already pre-cut with the number 4. I used the deep red scarlet Pitt pen as well on it, and make sure you color in all of the edges on that too, because they will get seen. And then I took a sanding block and I sanded off some of that color, and that just helps to give a little bit of texture and makes this number 4 just look a little bit more like leather. And you can see how it's just removing some of that top layer of color. Then I took the brown, which is the dark CPO 175, put it on my mat, added a little bit of water to it, and then I'm working that into those areas that I exposed with the sanding block. Decided it needed a little more red, so I just went back and added some more red to it as well. I love how this now looks like a piece of leather, and then decided that the star needed a little bit of the red as well, and I went and reached for this grunge stamp, colored it with the red, put it on there, and then decided I didn't really like it. It just looked like veins. So it's funny. Since it's all gelatos, I just added a little bit more gelato over the top, worked it in, and then I ended up really liking that red because it added some more depth to my star. And then I took a baby wipe and just removed it from the center so that the center would be like really bright, like you would envision a star to be, so that my number 4 would really pop off of it. And then I ended up putting it on the left-hand side. I don't know why I ended up putting it there, because I really wanted it over on the right, but anyway, it worked there, so we added it there. And then the rah-rah, I wanted it to look like the labels that you find on lockers in high schools. I know a lot of times kids will put stickers on lockers, so just adding the black around the edges like I did with all the other elements, using my Tombow mono adhesive to adhere it down so it looked like a label across a couple of the lockers. Love how this turned out, and it actually ends up, Varsity Rah Rah ends up being in the title of my layout. So I'm adding some foam mount to my number 4 so that it elevates up off that star a little bit. And I decided to put a piece of burlap down, and then I went, nah, maybe not. I like the look of the star by itself, so ended up abandoning that idea altogether. But I really like how the 4 looks on that star now. It just looks like the star, like the blue in the back kind of looks like the sky a little bit, and then the stars coming forward. I did notice that I had covered up a lot of the grid, so again I'm using my black Pitt pen as a stamping ink, and I'm adding it to some of those negative spaces around the cluster. Now I have some scraps of silver. This is glitter paper from Cosmo Cricut. So I took the red Scarlet pen and I colored it in. It looks pink on the camera, but it really was red. I did go over it with several coats. I let it dry between each coat and then come back and add more to it. And then the little wood veneer is from Studio Calico, and I just cut off the little talk bubble part. It says School Days. And then I used the cold gray, and then it's number 230, and I covered the wood veneer with it, and that just kind of helps the wood veneer match the rest of the paper. So I'm just trying to find placement for that flag. I wanted the red to be up in that corner to cover up that black space on the photograph, so I ended up making it a double banner and just trimming it down a little bit more. You can actually see the glitter through the school days wood veneer in that negative space where the lettering is. So I really, really liked it. And it's so super shiny. And like I said, it's really bright red. It's just hard to tell with the studio lights. Now it's kind of a little off camera, and I'm sorry about that, but I used some clear glitter nail polish over the top of that wood veneer just to give it a little bit of sparkle too. It dries pretty quick because the wood soaks it up. So now I've decided, since I've put that red up in the left, keeping with my visual triangle, I decided to add that red down in the bottom right hand corner. Then I noticed that that was a number 1 and my son's number was 4, so I just took a piece of the scrap and added that number 4 over there to cover up the number 1. Now it's time to work on getting that cluster in the bottom right hand corner to just kind of work in a little bit better. I had these little KHs that I had cut out from another project, so I'm trying to find placement for it here and was going to put it there, but decided that the blue on the KH was almost the same color as his jersey, so it was difficult to see it in the end, so I moved it up where the playbook was, and I was much happier there. So since I'm the sideline photographer, I thought a camera would be appropriate in that corner as well. So I just grabbed out my black Pitt pen and one of the Studio Calico cameras and just colored that in really well. Now my camera has a ginormous lens on it, so when you look at it all you really see is lens. So I decided to use a really large rhinestone there in the center. It's almost a little too oversized, but that's how my camera lens is, so I wanted to keep with that and mimic it. Now I found these little sequin stars. They're buttons and they're blue, so I thought they kind of helped to add in my star theme from behind the number 4 and filled in some of those other negative spaces really well. So I've scattered them around my photograph, and they do kind of help to draw your eye back down to the center where the photograph is. Now I'm going to use the gray pen again, and this time I'm going to use it to add some shadowing under my stars. Since I don't have a large amount of depth on this layout, I decided that doing this with the Pitt pens will add that depth and give the illusion of depth, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So remember that as long as the paper is pre-treated with gesso, they will blend. And in the areas where they don't, it's okay because it's a shadow. So then I decided to take the black pen, add a little bit of water to it on my little interference red palette there, and splatter some of that black. Now I already looked rough because it was the end of a ball game on a very windy night, so decided to cover up my photo so I didn't end up with black splatters all over my face, because that's not attractive. But I like how the black just kind of comes back and adds that richness back to this layout, and it kind of helps to bring in the black grid that is also in the background. So since these Pitt pens are actually reactive with water, I was able to use them as paint, and the glazes also help to react with that water as well. So whenever I colored in these circles and brought back in my lighting, they turned gray from the black to the gray. Also, the water helped to water it down and keep the paint a little translucent as well. So now I'm taking my Wink of Stella pen and adding some glitter back over into that right hand corner with the KH and the Varsity on that banner. It was just a little too flat. It needed that little touch of sparkle just to help bring in the glitter from the other elements as well. So now it's time for my journaling card. I just took an index card and cut it in half, and decided to go ahead and punch out the notebook paper punch from EK Success along the spine, like you would if you had notebook paper you ripped out. And I'm going to write my journaling on here, and it's just basically documenting that the team had a great year. They were district champs, and I was very proud of the efforts that my son had given. Then I noticed that that white over in that corner was just a little too bright, so I brought back my number stencil and I reached for some silver glimmer mist spray, and I sprayed the stencil so that I'd have those numbers off in that side, and that just kind of helped to soften up that white just a little bit, but keep it a little tone on tone. So I decided to do it down there in that bottom right hand corner as well. And I just like how it helped to blend all of those different things, all those elements back in together. And I was able to see all those numbers. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this long process video. I hope you've learned some great techniques. If you liked what you saw, please hit the subscribe button and leave me some comments. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for coming back and watching again. Here's some detailed photos of the layout, and I have, as always, I will have an accompanying blog post. The links will be down in the description bar below, and all of the supplies that were listed in this project are going to be found on my blog. So make sure you go check that out as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.